Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and today I am here to talk to you about D&D in a castle. Have you heard about this? You might have heard about this with the recent brouhaha about, what's her name? Satine Phoenix and her weirdo creep boyfriend. Apparently one of the things that they got cancelled from was this thing called D&D in a castle. And suddenly a whole bunch of people, mostly on Twitter, started talking all about it and thinking of how awesome it is, right? Except it's not. Let me make something really clear. D&D in a castle is stupid. It's not just stupid, though. It's representative of everything that has gone wrong in the hobby. I'm going to explain to you why. All right? Because D&D in a castle, what it basically is, putting aside all the weirdo stuff about, Satin Phoenix and her weirdo boyfriend, because they're not really, they were there as special guest stars, and you'll understand the context of what that means in a moment. So D&D in a castle is presented to you as though, hey, you and your friends will be able to play Dungeons and Dragons in a real castle with incredible celebrity guest stars, and so you're probably imagining in your head that you're going to be going all Game of Thrones or something like that, right? That there's some kind of a LARP thing, which itself would be pretty damn lame, right? But that's not what it is either. D&D in a Castle is a business that has been set up in England, where the claim that they make is that you can go and for a weekend play Dungeons and Dragons with special celebrities in a real castle. The castle is at most only technically a real castle, and the celebrities are only at most technically celebrities. But I guess they are the type of celebrities that matter to the type of person who would go to this thing, right? But more on that in a moment. The castle itself is a place called Lumley Castle, and it once upon a time, it was a real medieval castle, right? Like it was, I think, founded in the 14th century. It was built out of a manor house. It's not a real proper, like, necessarily what like you would think of as like one of these really huge castles or something like that. But what it was is that, there are two types of castles. There are castles that are kind of built from scratch that were like huge fortresses. And then what there was manorial homes of the Middle Ages that gradually started getting additional construction and sometimes like towers and turrets and things. And so it's like basically a mansion with castle elements, right? But that's still a castle. I will grant that. The problem is that that's not really what it is anymore, right? Because that was like a long time ago. And now, after the castle went through extensive renovations I believe it was in the late 18th century, it became more of a palatial manor again, right? It's a mansion, right? And then it ended up for a while being the house of a bishop. And then after that, it ended up getting sold, and it was converted into, I think, a 38-room hotel. So it is a hotel. That's what it is today. It's been completely redone into a hotel, a relatively luxury hotel, I guess, based on the prices that they charge. And where you're going, the outside will have some towers, right? Like some little towers on the sides of this mansion. And then the inside will be a hotel. You're going to a hotel, okay? So it's a medieval castle that eventually got rebuilt until there's very little left of the original castle, and what there is now is a hotel. And I mean, granted, it's not like, what do you call it? It's not a Motel 6, right? And it's going to look fancy, I'll grant you, but you're not going to be playing inside, you're not going to be playing inside Crack de Chevalier, right? You're going to be, or Mont Saint-Michel or something like that. You're going to be playing D&D in a hotel. So that's what you're paying for, right? Aside from that, there is the fact that you're going to be playing these super curated, very watered down, probably railroady, deeply controlled adventures that are meant to be full of maximum drama but minimum effort or risk, right, for people who don't really like playing D&D that much, being done by these special celebrities, right, that are all basically Twitch people, like Satine Phoenix was, right? People that are, voice actors, or I guess in Satine's case, ex-porn stars, but those are two very similar professions in a way, and that are now making money by doing these D&D style reality TV shows where they pretend to be people playing D&D for a camera, right? So that's not a real D&D session, and these aren't real D&D celebrities. They're celebrities that play people playing D&D online. That's what they are. A D&D celebrity in my mind would be, let's say Tim Kask or something like that, right? Like it would be people who helped design D&D, right? Those are D&D celebrities, or people who are fundamental producers of D&D material over the years, right? I mean, I would grant, for example, Monty Cook would be sort of a D&D celebrity. I don't like him much, but he's a D&D celebrity, right? Or Jonathan Tweet, or David Zeb Cook, and of course I'd grant, some of that to the, even to the, like, the Gygax kids, though they're really like, they're just milking dad's fame, but still, that would be something. But that's not what anybody who's going to this hotel is going to want. No. While they're having like their pasta with truffles and staying at night in what they imagine to be a castle, what they want are YouTube or Twitch celebrities, right? They want people who've played with Matt Mercer. That's their idea of someone who's an expert on D&D, right? And the type of person they would want playing that special adventure that has been set up for them and their corporate friends or whatever, and so what is the cost of all this? Well, you are paying about $3,000 for a weekend of gaming. Accommodations not included, so that's an extra $1,000 if you're staying at the hotel, which I think you might have to say. I don't know, I didn't look into it too much detail, but it's a huge amount of money. You're spending at least $4,000 there, right? Also, if you bring like your wife or something, then she doesn't have to pay the $3,000 for the thing, but she does have to pay like 500 and some just for tagging along. So if she's not a gamer, right? If she's not playing, if she just wants to go and do a vacation in England, which there would be much better vacations in England to have than to go with your husband and then watch him game a really bad game of D&D with B-grade voice actors for 3 days. Right? I hope if you're one of the wives that you get away and go somewhere interesting in England. There's so much to do there. But yeah, this is like people going to a pseudo-historical place to play a pseudo game of D&D with pseudo D&D experts. Right? It's the most appalling thing imaginable. And so all of that added together is the very picture of the model that Wizards actually wants, right? Which is D&D as a lifestyle brand. Who goes to this? Because apparently they're doing okay, I guess. I mean, they're clearly being successful. And when the name of this project was tied into Satine Phoenix, it didn't hurt them very much. On the contrary, that had tons of people saying, "Oh my God, I want to go there," right? And those people are all the people you'd imagine. They're people that talk a lot about D&D. They talk a lot about Critical Role. They talk a lot about D&D art and D&D plushies and plush dice and D&D Funko Pops or whatever, like all the D&D merchandise. And you get the feeling that they don't really actually play D&D. Maybe they played it once or twice. They don't really like to play D&D. That's not an interest. That's not an important part of being a member of the D&D community. Right? The important thing about being a member of the D&D community is watching the latest season of Critical Role, and it's talking about how supportive our community is of diversity, and it's paying $4,000 to go to an overpriced manor house hotel in Durham. You're not even anywhere very interesting in England. You're in like the sticks to end up playing a fake super, Potemkin Village style railroaded D&D adventure for 3 days with somebody who was once a guest star on, a second-rate knockoff of Critical Role. That's the lifestyle brand. That's what is being aimed for here. And this exemplifies why we have to fight that, because some people say, well, okay, so it's all that's all stupid, right? There was one tweet that I quoted on my Twitter account there, which was like the perfect example of this, which was like some person that said, oh my God, D&D in a castle sounds so cool. I have to do this. I will be a total fan guy / girl / they. I'm not sure if what they mean to say is that they're fluid on all three of those, or it invented a new word for me, fan they, instead of fanboy or fangirl, right? And then the second part he says, of course, I've never actually played D&D, but I would do it, So these are the D&D fans that Wizards wants. These are also the D&D fans that the left wants, because there's only two ways to look at at D&D, right? It's either a hobby or it's a lifestyle brand / community. If it's a hobby, then what defines that you are in it is that you play D&D. Right, that you're a D&D player or an RPG player. We could expand this to say the whole RPG hobby. Right, when I say D&D, I'm just using that as shorthand for the entire role playing hobby. That you play role playing games, right? That you've read role playing games. Maybe you've designed role playing games. That's not a requirement, but it could be. And therefore, you are involved and invested in that game and in the hobby of playing that game. And things related to that. And that doesn't mean that you can't like having plushy dice if you really want to, but that the central thing for you is the game itself, and the game playing is the central feature. And what defines whether you accept what someone has to say about the hobby or not is just how much actual cred they have in terms of being D&D players. Right? That is why if you've been there a long time, you get more say because it's your fucking hobby, right? You're the ones that defined it. And people who are new also get a say as long as they're playing, and the more they play, the more say they're going to get, right? The other side of this is D&D as a community / lifestyle brand, in which case you are a member of that community, possibly without ever playing D&D. You could theoretically, if D&D as a lifestyle brand is what succeeds, you could end up being a member of the D&D community for 30 years, never having once opened an RPG book, because that's not relevant to being part of the D&D community. Being part of the D&D community is based on things like watching the media that is being put out relating to stuff based on D&D, like mainly these D&D based reality shows like Critical Role, where people pretend to be playing D&D while using improv acting skills. You're watching D&D talk shows, you're buying D&D toys and products. You've got a D&D t-shirt, you've got a D&D rainbow t-shirt, you've got dice, but you don't roll them, you just think they're kind of cool. They're sort of like, what somebody else would be doing with New Age crystals, you're doing with dice, something like that. All of that stuff, and that's what defines. And really fundamentally in the D&D community, what defines it is that you feel like you're part of the D&D community. You might never have played D&D. You might never have looked at a D&D book. You might certainly never have opened a D&D book. You might have no idea what a saving throw actually means. But if you feel like you're a D&D player, then that's an absolute right that you have to be recognized as a D&D player, because you identify as that, right? So you're part of the D&D community, even though you don't really like D&D even. You would never care to play it. But because you feel like part of that community, you belong to it and should have a major say in it, probably a larger say than those old white men that had been in D&D long ago and are all probably toxic people. And in fact, D&D probably should cease to exist as a game because it's so toxic, right? But the D&D community could then live on where we wouldn't have to worry. We would no longer be harassed by D&D gamers saying you don't play D&D, because that would be a thing of the past. We'd get rid of it, right? But then what you could have is, you would only have the right people, the people that are chosen to be on these shows. They will play D&D for us, or pretend to play D&D for us, because we know they're not. They're pretending to play a game that we hate for us, so we don't have to. And the only proper way to be part of D&D is to watch them pretend to play. That's the D&D community, right? And that's what they want. And the real reason why, because you could say, well, so what? Fuck, live and let live, right? Let them do their own thing. But the reason why that's important is because if they get to define this as a community, it's precisely what I was giving in my little monologue there, that they would then have the claim to have the right to police the hobby, because the hobby wouldn't to them exist. We're all part of the D&D community, except we're going to kick you out of the D&D community because you're a filthy gamer, and we don't actually want gamers involved in D&D. Whoever heard, what world do we live in where gamers think they should get to be part of D&D? Get rid of them. Out, I say. And they're going to be able to do that if they want to, right? At least at certain contexts. I'm expecting that at some point there will be a D&D convention style event where no actual D&D will be played, or no actual RPGs, right? What it'll be is some kind of, consuming products event, right? Where people have lots of cool stuff. There'll be some immersive experiences, maybe like rides and people doing improv action in person. There'll be lots of talks about D&D, and diversity, or D&D and inclusion, or, how we fixed D&D from the evil, alt-light Yahtzees that they were before, and stuff like that. But there won't actually be anybody playing the game, because that is no longer part of the hobby. So that's what they want to create, And now, okay, in practice, you might say, well, they can never actually destroy. No, they can't. They can't completely destroy the hobby, right? What they can do is do everything in their power to damage the lines of production of the hobby, so to say, that allow new people to enter the hobby, that allow people to be involved in the hobby, and allow people already in the hobby to interconnect with each other. So will they be able to break into your house, go down to your basement, and arrest you and your friends while you're playing first edition D&D? Probably not. I don't know. You'll have to ask Joe Biden. Maybe in Canada, Pierre Trudeau. That's very likely to happen, actually, because it's only a question of time until they decide that playing certain editions of D&D is just directly a hate crime. And you won't have any guns to defend yourself in Canada. So that could happen, but it's very unlikely. I'll grant you, it's not likely to happen. But it doesn't matter, because then what is important about the hobby as something that will carry on, right? As something that exists, and that is something beyond something that you just do with your immediate friends. Otherwise the hobby ends when enough of your friends are dead that you don't get to play anymore, right? And there will be nobody else to play with because the hobby's dead, right? And you don't really want that, right? I mean, I want a hobby that outlives me. I want people to be playing, using sword and Caravan, 100 years after I'm dead. That would be awesome, right? That's why a person writes a book, to immortalize themselves. So in practice, it's true they can't completely destroy us, but they can go to war against us, and we need to go to war against them. We need to fight at every moment any definition of being a part of a D&D movement, which they will call a community, right? Which we call a hobby. Any claim to being part of the D&D phenomenon from people that don't actually play or don't like the game, right? If you don't like D&D, or if you don't play D&D, you don't get to claim to have ownership over D&D, right? And likewise, we can't directly destroy them. I'm kind of hoping that time will take care of that, because obviously right now D&D is kind of cool, right? One of the things that defines some people in the D&D community is just, I watch Stranger Things, therefore I'm part of the D&D community. That's enough to be part of the D&D community. But eventually that'll pass, and the fad of D&D live streaming shows will probably pass too. It'll fade very badly, at least, and then the whole thing as a marketing scheme will collapse, right? The interests are twofold, right? There's people that are using this as a marketing scheme, people like Wizards of the Coast, and there's people that are using this as a political agenda, mainly the leftists, including those that have infiltrated Wizards of the Coast, right? So that may eventually die out by itself. We can't kill it, but what we can do is make a stark point of saying these are two completely different activities. They are not connected to each other, right? The D&D community has nothing to do with D&D. You have to make that very clear. You have to state that anywhere that you see someone trying to call up this kind of ghost of D&D is a lifestyle, or D&D is a feeling that you have, or D&D is something that is bigger than just playing the game, right? As soon as they start saying that, that's their excuse for saying we can bring in a bunch of people that don't like D&D, don't play D&D, will never play D&D, probably hate D&D, and get them to vote on taking you out, right? That's the goal. They're trying to stack the voting pool, so to say, of who gets to be in control of defining things for this hobby. And if you're part of the hobby, you want to fight back against that. Also, don't go to stupid D&D in a castle, right? It's just a stupid idea. You're going there, you're going to a bad hotel in rural England. Well, not a bad hotel. It's probably a nice hotel. I shouldn't criticize the hotel. But you're going to a hotel in rural England that is probably kind of nice, but you're still in the middle of rural England, and you've got you've ended up spending $4,000 to do it. I could give you a better D&D experience, okay? Get the money to buy yourself a plane ticket to South America, right? Bring you and your friends, right? You stay at a hotel here. I'm not going to set up one for you, but I could find one for you if you like. Hotels here are really cheap, very affordable. They're not going to be a great hotel, but they'll be affordable. And you could go to. There are some really great hotels here that if you want to spend a lot of money, you could go to. And then you can game with me for a weekend, right? We can run some DCC or Lion and Dragon. And the only thing, and I'm not going to charge you $4,000 for it. I'm not going to charge you $3,000 for it. You know, I'll have you buy my dinners. You know, that's all I'm going to ask. I would love that. You know, why? Because we're part of the same hobby, right? So that is how the deal should go. You know, the people that are spending $4,000 to feel like they're part of a community are essentially cheating themselves. That's everything for today. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Poker plus Argento Natural.